I was originally a carpenter and a farmhand in the Central Coast of California and decided that I wanted to go back to school. Went to UC Davis after 2 years of undergrad at Santa Barbara City College. It was really bold to think that I could get into medical school. And I kind of overshot the mark. I got an MD PhD scholarship at Northwestern University in Chicago. So I went from having grown up in Santa Barbara with my wife, we were high school sweethearts, to Chicago. So we decided I would do my graduate work at San Diego. And I'd been accepted into a program at UC San Diego that had 2 of the top gene therapy specialists. I really wanted to do gene therapy with retroviruses. That was what I thought was going to be my life. And so we moved down to San Diego, and I started working in the laboratory of Inderverma, which is in the molecular biology and virology labs at the Salk Institute. And this is a place where graduate students normally aren't allowed to go. There was 7 Nobel laureates at the time, a really intense competitive environment. Carved out a little niche that I was going to work on for my graduate work, which was asking questions about how retrovirus RNA is packaged. And that, through a cascade of events, being at the right place at the right time, asking the right questions, surrounded by geniuses, led to this series of discoveries that now forms the basis of the RNA technology platform that gives rise to these vaccines. And 10 issued patents. They were all filed in '89. If there's no merit to my voice being in the conversation, whether it's true or not, whether I'm factually correct or not, let's park that just for a minute. And I freely admit, no one's perfect. I'm not perfect. It's one of my core points, is people should think for themselves. And I try really hard to give people the information and help them to think, not to tell them what to think. But the point is, if it's not okay for me to be part of the conversation, even though I'm pointing out scientific facts that may be inconvenient, then who can be allowed? And whether you're in the camp that says I'm a liar and I didn't invent this technology despite the patents, and there's a whole cohort of that, no one can dispute that I played a major role in the creation of this tech. And virtually all other voices that have that background have conflicts of interest, financial conflicts of interest. I think I'm the only one that doesn't. I'm not getting any money out of this. So I think that it starts to touch on some fundamental constitutional principles about rights of free speech. I was deplatformed from LinkedIn many months ago. There was actually 2 events of deplatforming in LinkedIn. And in both cases, I was able to get an explanation for what the specific crimes were, the thought crimes. And in the first one, it was a LinkedIn posting in which I pointed out that the chairman of the board of Thomson Reuters also sits on the board of Pfizer. And I simply wrote, does this look like a conflict of interest to you? It's the horizontal integration across all major industries now under the control of common funds. All of these industries, the harmonization of the tech censorship, the interests of pharma, big media, and governments, all being harmonized in their messaging globally. I mean, I travel a lot, and I have physicians coming to me all the time about what they're experiencing. The same playbook is going on every continent. But getting back to LinkedIn, so this is the first event, and Steve Kirsch intervened. He's a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, called up a vice president of LinkedIn. The guy looked into it. Meanwhile, people started dropping off of LinkedIn in protest, and there was major press articles all over the world. And then they reinstated me, and I actually got a very kind letter. This is unprecedented, personal letter from this vice president, apologizing and saying specifically that they didn't have the talent to fact check me, and therefore they were going to let me go. Now then, subsequently I got dropped again. In that case, the sin was one of their fact checkers, because remember this is Microsoft, had identified the Atlantic attack article that was written about me and concluded that I was an anti-vaxxer and therefore I should not be allowed on LinkedIn. Now, the context for that's fascinating is that Atlantic Monthly attack article that is often cited by my detractors. It was written a few days after Peter Navarro and I came out with an op-ed in the Washington Times in which we criticized the Biden policy on vaccines and said that they should be reserved for those that need them most and not used universally. And we said some other things about the need of testing and tools so that people can assess their true risk. It was a political retaliation intended to take me off the map as I was starting to interact more of in a public policy sphere. Now with this Twitter event, my wife and I have racked our brains about what is likely to have been the tweet that triggered this. And, you never know. The last two that I can think of that went out was one in which we referred to a fantastic video that has been put out by the Canadian COVID Care Alliance Group that summarizes all the malfeasance and data manipulation and misinterpretation associated with the Pfizer vaccines and their clinical trials. It's a super video. I guess that is interpreted as something that would cause people to become vaccine hesitant. That's the sin in general, is saying things that cause people to become vaccine hesitant. The other thing that I put out immediately before that was a post, a link to a website for the World Economic Forum that lays out their entire strategy for how they manage media, how they're managing COVID-19, and all of their core messaging. It's a fascinating website with links. Those are the only two things I can think of that would meet the criteria. So, my position all the way through this comes off of the platform of bioethics and the importance of informed consent. So my position is that people should have the freedom of choice, particularly for their children, and that in order to appropriately choose to participate in a medical experiment, they have to be fully informed of the risks as well as the benefits. And so I've tried really hard to make sure that people have access to the information about those risks and potential benefits, the true unfiltered academic papers and raw data, etc. And the policy that's being implemented is one in which no discussion of the risks are allowed, because by definition they will elicit vaccine hesitance. So it can't be discussed. But that's the fundamental background, that's the backbone of informed consent. So informed consent is not only not happening, it's being actively blocked.